right. Hello. Let's see how I'm doing. Hopefully I'm coming through all right. Let me make sure things are configured properly. Coming through good. All right. Awesome. That is great to hear. All right. Going to adjust some things here while I get going. How's everyone doing? It's great to see you all. Thank you so much for dropping by to join me for another dev stream. I'm really excited for this one. Looking forward to chatting with you all and showcasing some cool new stuff. There's some exciting things in this update that I'm really looking forward to getting into. Hope everyone is doing really great. All right, just give a moment to get everything sorted out. All right, so the plan for today is to get into the details of version 0.8.1, which is going to be available on the alpha channel of the software probably tomorrow if I do everything that I hope to do between now and then. I was hoping it might be available today, but I'm not quite there yet. But yeah, it's going to be really exciting. It is going to be, and I want to be very upfront with everyone about this, this is going to be another alpha channel update, which you should all interpret as quite dangerous. You know, here there be dragons. There are some big new features in this update, as you will see, that do require testing. We've been testing it internally, and it's looking really good. But so it's ready for you all to test, but it is only ready for testing. It is not ready for you to use it in your weekly game and then possibly have a bad experience. I would feel terrible if that were to happen. So please keep in mind, this is a alpha channel update. It is not safe. It is dangerous, but it is cool, and it is going to be safe by the time we get it to release. And so if you're interested in helping with testing it out, then that would be absolutely wonderful. Otherwise, it's good to be excited about this stuff that's coming, but don't rush head first. Don't dive in. This stuff does need testing in order to make sure that it's nice and stable for all of you to use in a live game session. Let's talk about what I'm going to do today. So hopefully most of you have gotten the chance to see one of these streams before. If so, you'll kind of know what the typical routine is. But if not, what the plan is that I'm going to go through the major changes in the new update. I'm going to demo them so you can see them sort of live and see what they're doing. And then I'm going to take some questions from chat and hopefully engage with you all and answer some questions of things you'd love to know more about with the new update and everything. So I'll do a couple of license key giveaways as well, as is my usual custom. And hype train incoming. Nice. I don't know who's doing this, but you guys are getting me hyped. I like it. So that's going to be the plan. Very exciting. And so there's probably a lot to cover. So I am going to go ahead and jump into it. I will do my best to take questions from chat, but there is a lot of ground to cover, so I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to just jump into some of the awesome new stuff that this new tabletop version has, and we'll take it from there. You will notice there's no background music today. That is intentional, and that is because one of the very key themes of this update version is improvements to audio. So I'm going to be playing music through the VTT because I'm going to be demoing all of the new audio features. So I won't do any background music. I'm just going to do music in the virtual tabletop to show those features to you. All right. So, getting into it, the milestone for this update is over here. It is 0.8.1 audio overhaul. I have these checkboxes at the top. Maybe someone can put this link in chat if anyone's curious. I have these checkboxes up at the top which kind of summarize the key themes, and then there's a lot of work that's gone into it, about 106 issues, features that are included in this update. So it's a big one. It's a really big update. And as you can see, there's like a little bit of stuff that I still need to get finished, but I think I'll be able to get that done in time to get the alpha release out tomorrow. So that's my goal. Someone's saying my burn down chart looks spiffy. I'm not sure it does. I think I definitely develop in spurts. I'm not sure that the PMs in the group will appreciate the reliability of my development velocity, but I try. So the major themes for this update, the main one is audio improvements. So that's what I'm going to focus on. In that there's a lot of major changes for audio, stuff I'm really excited about. And then the dice rolling system, it gets some really sexy new upgrades under the hood to continue making dice rolling better for developers, as well as a couple new features for players as well. And then just some other little API improvements that I may or may not get to. So the patch notes, I see a question from Chaos. The patch notes are not on the website yet, but they will be on the website, when the release gets cut together. The patch notes still need some tidying up and editing and stuff. So let's go ahead and start getting into some of the details. So the first major theme of 0.8.1, of course, under audio improvements, is that the system for how audio is played in Foundry has been basically completely reworked. So I'll put some music on while I'm talking to you about this, although, you'll get a chance to sort of see a little preview of some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about while I talk about it, but I'll get to all of the individual features, but I'll just let this be on the screen so you can kind of see a little bit of what the new UI and the new user experience and the new tools are for audio. I'm just going to turn my global down a little bit. I don't want this to be too loud. I'll turn it up louder when I'm actually going to showcase how some specific things work. Okay, so getting into the audio stuff. The underlying technology that is used to play audio is now redone. So I was previously using this library called Howler, which is a good library. It is a good library for audio playback, but it is a little bit... actually, that's a great question. Let me confirm. Are you guys able to hear the music? Is it coming through? Let me turn it up, the volume up. No music? Oh, maybe it's better now? Better now. All right, so what's the case is that now it's a little bit too loud in my headphones, although if it sounds good to you all, I think what I might just do is just turn my volume down a little bit at the OS level. Yeah, it's tricky getting the audio balance right for showcasing all of this, but I'm gonna take these off of repeat so that they will. I had set these to just repeat, but I want to instead showcase the playlist features, so we'll just let this start to shuffle through. Okay, great. Thanks for bearing with me on that. I'm playing some awesome music from Tabletop RPG Music, by the way. They are a very awesome creator on Patreon. They are not only on Patreon, but yeah, Tabletop RPG Music. They have a preview pack that you can get for free with Foundry that is amazing. It's actually the one that I'm using right now. Really incredible audio. You can find it under the exclusive content section. It's this one, Tabletop RPG Music. Really love this creator. I mean, among many amazing audio music creators, but their stuff's super good, and you can get more tracks from them on Patreon if you support them there. But this pack is free for everyone who wants to use it. Okay, so maybe someone can put a link to their Patreon in chat. So under the hood, the software used to be using this system called Howler, which is a good library, but maybe it was a little bit more than what Foundry needed. It had a lot of features that I wasn't using. It had kind of a lot of overhead in terms of doing things in a particular way. And so the infrastructure improvement as part of the audio system enhancement is to completely redo all of that. So I'm not using the Howler library anymore. I am using the native web audio API, which if you Google that, you will find some good resources. This is a modern, I mean, it's actually been around for a while, but it's a relatively modern API that's supported by all major browsers for handling the playback of audio in websites. And so Howler itself was a layer on top of this API. And so that's what kind of Howler was doing, but it also did some other things and used like HTML5 streams in some cases and some other things like that. So this is a little bit of a simplification of going straight to the source of the web audio API to handle the way that audio is loaded, the way that it's buffered, the way that playback is managed, the way that volume is controlled, fading, all sorts of things like this are now managed through just direct usage of this API. So, you know, this is a big kind of under the hood change about how audio works in Foundry, and it is able to empower a lot of the other changes that you will see when I'm showcasing specific features. So that's kind of the important thing to know about like what's under the hood of this. So getting into some like specific features that now exist for audio, I'll just sort of start showcasing some of them. Yeah, we'll sort of go through some new stuff that the audio system can do. I'm not going to do this in maybe necessarily exactly the order that this stuff is listed here, but I will kind of try and get through all of these notes. So I think maybe I'll handle the UI stuff first rather than the underlying features, because I think the UI is kind of like what's at the very top layer. I mean, it's kind of what you see first when you just like look at the screen. So on the UI side, you can see that the audio playlist sidebar has been pretty redesigned. There's a new look, there's new features. So I'll just kind of like go through overall what the new UI is. I know the text is small here. It's kind of more for my own notes rather than for you all to read, but I guess I can kind of zoom in. I'll have to make it wrap, which is going to kind of be a little ugly to read, but I guess I can do that. This is more for my own notes, just so I know like what to talk with you about. So in the sidebar, still you've got the volume controls at the top, but now in addition to just creating a playlist, which was previously the only option, you can now create folders. So that's probably like one of the first things that you'll notice is that we can create like, you know, sound effects. We can create like a folder for sound effects. And if we want to, we can create, you know, combat sounds. We can create a playlist for combat sounds in the sound effects folder. More ability to organize, manage subfolders like with every other tab as well. More ability to manage the way that you are organizing your audio. So that's a first key thing. Certainly when you search in the filtering, so like camp, if I filter for camp, it will expand automatically any folders that contain a playlist where either the playlist name matches camp or some aspect of the track name itself matches camp. So here I've gotten, some of those. And so it'll kind of like expand out to show you, like if you're looking for a particular thing, star Dreamscape. So Dreamscape shows because it's playing. It will always show you a track that's currently playing, even if it doesn't match your filtering. Although that is one of the things that I'm still working on, and I'll show that later. There's a couple of things that are still going to be changed before this finally goes out, and one of them does have to do with how currently playing tracks are shown. Really appreciate all the questions. I do see some questions coming in chat. For this part of the stream, I am going to kind of go through and only periodically take questions. So please be patient with me if I don't get too much to your questions. I think a lot of your questions are probably going to be answered just by me going through this stuff. And if there's questions that aren't clearly answered by that, then it would be a great time to ask those in a little bit. Okay, so where was I? So yeah, folders, that's one big thing. Obviously, like you can still collapse and expand both individual playlists as well as the folder itself. So there's a kind of already like quite a lot of like nesting structure here where you can kind of organize in a lot of sort of different ways how you want to kind of categorize your music or ambience. I should put on some ambience. I'm sure I've got like let's see, snowing. That's perfect. We'll get some nice sort of windy, snowy sound going. Okay. So yeah, folders, that's one really key thing. Another key aspect of the UI changes is obviously as you can maybe see, each individual track, the layout of how the tracks are displayed is now simplified and also streamlined a little bit. So previously it was like cramming everything onto a single line item for a single sound. So now it's like spaced out a little bit more, where there's more space for the track names. The buttons are a little bit more condensed. It'll be easier to see like full track titles. And when a track is playing, the playback information for that track is shifted to a second line. So if you see on the right where this like Above the Ruins track is playing, the volume control, the pause button, which is new, I'll get to pause in a minute, the volume control, as well as an actual timestamp that's updating to show you the total duration of the track, as well as the current timestamp of the track. This playback information is on a second line below the title. So I think the UI is a lot easier. It's a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to work with. So I think that's a nice big improvement. Makes it easier to see, where you are. Like I know right now that track was just about to end, and so it's not a surprise that it goes to the next track in the playlist. So having all of that information is nice. That's something that I'm able to get directly out of the web audio API that can feed into the front end UI. The question about the slider bar. The slider bar is the volume. So this is increasing or decreasing the playback volume. Okay, so the next thing that you'll notice in the interface changes is that a lot of the little buttons that used to be on every track, like the trash can to delete it, the little pencil edit icon to edit the track, these are all not here anymore. I understand why I did it that way originally, but it really wasn't a great design. And so those options that are less frequently used in terms of I want to reconfigure this track or I want to delete it entirely, those are now moved to a right-click context menu. So for each individual track, there is a context menu which has some options, and then also for the playlist itself, the context menu has a number of additional options that I will go through individually. So it's less prone to misclicks. You're not going to like accidentally click and maybe like get prompted to delete your track. It's more consistent with the rest of the UI for other document types. I think this is a nice improvement. You'll also see that I mentioned the pause button. Let me turn up the volume here so you can hear it. I can just pause the track exactly where it was in playback, and I can resume from that same place. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Yeah, able to toggle the repeating, stuff like that. Other things to mention. Let's go through at the playlist level, and I'll go in a little bit more detail about each of these features. This isn't intended to be like, this is it, let's move on. This is more of like a broad overview of the UI changes. Strixon. Oh, am I not appropriately accrediting? I talked about tabletop RPG music. I didn't talk about Strixon's awesome Forgotten Adventures assets that I used to make this map out of. So if you want to make battle maps like this one, you can just go to Forgotten Adventures and you can get their stuff, and then you too can make snow-shrouded Crossroads battle maps. Okay, so let's talk about some of the individual options in the context menu that are all new as part of this interface redesign. At the individual playlist level, so like for the overall tabletop RPG music playlist, I can edit the playlist. So there's some new options here that I will talk about while I have this window up. So obviously I have the playlist name and the playback mode, which I can edit. So sequential, shuffling, simultaneous, soundboard. I can do that. There's also a fade duration that will apply to all of the tracks in the playlist when they crossfade from one to the next. I'll showcase how that works in a little bit. There is a playlist description field where I can put in some description. So I didn't do this yet, but something like a collection of awesome music from tabletop RPG music available as exclusive content for Foundry VTT. Very cool. And then that metadata is just associated with the playlist. It's just for your reference, and it can help you remember what a playlist is for, just some notes for yourself. And then it's also there in the underlying data. So of course, if any modules are doing stuff with improving playlists, they would have that data available to display it in a certain way. If you wanted to show a banner or something of what the description of a track that's currently playing, you could do all sorts of stuff with this data. It's just here for your reference, but it has a lot of potentially practical application. Bulk import is something that I think many of you will be excited about, where you can, I'll showcase this later, I'm not going to do it right now, but you can designate a folder full of audio, and you can set up a playlist from all of that audio with a single operation. So it'll save you a lot of time if you're taking an album or something and then converting that album into a playlist. I'll showcase it later. So those are that's editing the playlist. Clearing the folder, that's boring. That just takes the playlist outside of the folder. I'll just drag it back in there. Deleting it, pretty self-explanatory. I don't actually want to delete this playlist, so I'm not going to do that. Duplicate, that's something that you couldn't easily do with a playlist before. So suppose you wanted to copy your playlist, I can do that. And then I've got a copy of Michael Ghelfi's music playlist, and I can, change the copy. So it's helpful. No, Michael, I don't want to delete your playlist. I am going to delete the copy, though, so I hope that doesn't offend you. But just deleting the copy, not the original. Export is a omnipotence. Oh, that's a great question that I should answer while I'm on the particular topic of duplication. Duplicating the playlist does not copy the files. It just duplicates the data structure. The copied playlist would still be pointing at the same underlying files. So it just copies the data structure. Same as when you copy an actor or copy a scene. It's not copying the images. It's just making a copy of the document that references those same images. An important distinction, which is of course intentional. Need some. All right. Other right-click options. Export data. This is a cool one. So if you have set up a playlist that you want to export and then load it into a different world, maybe. So like maybe you're in one world and you set up this great like combat music playlist and you want to use your combat music in a different setting. You can go grab that combat music, you can export it, and then you can import that combat music into another playlist, and you can get that imported in. Again, like duplication, it doesn't copy the underlying music. It just copies the data structure of the document. So you can use that to, I can export this tabletop RPG music, and then I would have that exported JSON file that I could use to import this playlist into another world or something. So yeah, that's very handy. And then of course the converse of that would be importing a playlist. So if you have an exported playlist that you want to import back in, you can do that by importing it on top of an existing one. So that's the right-click options for the playlist itself. So let's talk about right-click options for individual tracks within the playlist. So individual tracks within the playlist, for example, this A Strange World track, when I edit the sound for the individual track, I can choose the track title. Obviously point it to the audio source itself that it comes from. Then adjust the default volume at which the track's going to play. Should it repeat? Should it not repeat? And as well as a track level fade duration. So you may have some tracks where you want them to crossfade in or fade out. While you might have other tracks where you don't want that to happen. So you might, for example, have some tracks where there's a natural fade built into the audio, and adding additional fade would not be useful. So your track level fade duration will override the fade duration at the playlist level. So when you're setting up a playlist, you can have some tracks that like come in immediately straight away, other tracks that fade in, and you can customize that however you want. And then, of course, lastly, there's just like with the playlist description itself, there's a sound description field for some text. So if you have like a short description of the audio, or you want to maybe leave some notes for yourself about like, the context in which you might want to use it, you could do that. So, you could add some notes to help yourself remember what a certain sound is or a certain track. Maybe it could be artist credits, maybe it could be other stuff like that. Iceman asks, there's lots of questions about fading. I get that the fade stuff is really exciting to people. I will showcase that in more detail soon. But yes, the fade duration is in milliseconds. And yeah, I'll get into the details of fading in just a minute. Other stuff on the UI side is, in addition to edit sound, preload sound. That is a feature that already existed before, so that's not a new feature, but it has gotten some cool improvements. So preload sound, what that does is when you go to preload a sound, it won't do anything for me, but what that does is it causes others who are currently connected to your game to begin loading that sound in the background, so that if you play that sound next, the other players in your game will have already loaded it, and so they'll just go straight into the audio without a delay where they're kind of loading and buffering the file. So if you know that there's a certain piece of audio that you're going to want to use coming up, then you can say, like, say I'm gonna go to Dreamscape next. I can preload that sound for the players, and then all of the players will be loading that sound in the background, and so that when you start playing it, everyone will be synchronized and they'll start that playback at the same time. Now, I said there were some improvements to preload. One cool thing that Foundry does now is that if you're playing a playlist where the playlist would automatically transition to a next sound, so that could be sequential playback where they're just playing in order, or it could be shuffled playback where it is kind of shuffling the whole playlist. In either of those cases, when the currently playing track approaches a certain proximity of the end of its playback, Foundry will automatically begin preloading the next track in the background. So currently it's configured for 20 seconds. So basically, like right now in this Across the Hinterlands track, it's going to go to a next track right now. Foundry is already loading that next track in the background for me. So as soon as Across the Hinterlands ends playing and it goes to the next track, there shouldn't really be any loading delay. It goes to Eldritch Prophecy, and Eldritch Prophecy has already loaded because it just auto-loaded the next one in the background. So yeah, I think that's a really handy feature if you're using like playlists for, combat encounters. You've got like a bunch of different combat music. When one piece of audio approaches the end of its playback, it'll automatically start preloading the next one so that there should be no real audible delay for your players. I think that's a nice feature. So other stuff, delete sound, of course. We don't want to delete any sounds. So that's kind of the interface side of the update for audio. That will, obviously motivates a lot of what's underneath it. Phildias asks a visual reference to the current position of the track. It may be a little bit small to see on the screen, but directly to the left of the volume bar, there is a timer that tells you exactly where the playback is relative to the total duration of the track. So this one right now is at like 1 minute 17 seconds out of 2 minutes and 7 seconds. So it gives you the exact timing of playback that you're seeing. One other thing on the interface side is just a little bit of visual feedback that it will give you when you start loading a track. So I'm going to pick a sound that I haven't used yet. I'll play Michael Ghelfi's Demetrian's theme. I don't think I've loaded that one yet. So what's going to happen when I play it is that there'll be a little spinner that will now show you that a piece of audio is actually like currently loading, where previously it might be like the UI would have shown that the audio was playing, but you're not hearing it yet, and that's because like it was still loading. So now there's a better feedback mechanism that like your audio is loading. So if I play this, you should see just very briefly a little spinner that would show you. I'll try that. Yep, there it goes. So you see there's a little spinner, and then once it actually starts playing, that spinner resolves into a stop icon. So just a little bit better feedback for you to understand that your sound is still in the process of loading, and that's why you're not hearing anything yet. Cool. All right, so that is it for like kind of the UI side of playlists. So I'm going to now get into the actual features of like what's happening with some of these different feature options for audio. All right, so for actual features, as you can see, so I already talked about, well, let's see. No, I'll start with fade. I know that fade is like that's what people are most excited about. So I have this playlist configured at 2,000 milliseconds of fade. I'm going to change the fade duration on this playlist to 5,000 milliseconds so that it's a little bit more obvious. And then I'm going to turn the volumes up, and I'm just going to kind of cycle through the sounds for a little bit so you can hear what it sounds like with a 5,000 milliseconds. So that's 5 seconds. That's kind of exaggerated. Like, you maybe normally wouldn't use 5 seconds of fade. That's probably a bit much, but hopefully it'll make it easier for you to hear. I'll turn the volume up, and I'll just like go through some of these sounds for a little bit, and you can maybe hear sort of how the soundscape blends from one to the next with this fading enabled. So hopefully you're able to hear that. The 5-second fade is a bit long. It's probably longer than I would actually use if I were doing this, but maybe it makes it more obvious to you what you're hearing. Now, oh, interesting. I just saw a little UI bug there, but that's okay. So one of the things that you'll be hearing in addition to that, I'm going to start a sound in just a minute. You'll hear that when I start a sound from nothing playing, that first sound is going to fade in. So let's hear what that sounds like. And then when I also stop the sound, you'll hear that the sound fades out to stopped. So you'll get just much smoother audio transitions overall when you do it that way. So let's start Demon Lord. Actually, I'm gonna stop it. Turn the volume up first, and then I'll play it. So you hear that long fade in. I'm gonna wait until we get to a part of the track that maybe has like a little bit more going on, and then I will stop it, and you'll hear that there's a gentle fade out depending on the fade time that you have set. So there you hear was kind of a slow fade out when you stopped the audio as well. Mr. Transcended says, kind of strange seeing the volume and other information pop in at the bottom. That is one of the little things that's going to actually still change a little bit with the final version. I've got one piece of UI enhancement that's still kind of work in progress that I didn't finish in time for this stream, but I'll talk about it in a little bit. So that is the fading. I saw some questions about stop versus pause. So please bear in mind, this is an alpha release. So this is the first time these new features are getting shared with you as users to try them. And so what's very important is to get user feedback about what's working well, what's not working well. None of these design decisions are strictly final. I mean, some of them I feel very strongly about, but a lot of this is, it needs user testing and feedback in order to like make it settle in. So when I say something like, this is what it does, just please put that into the context of, this is what it does for the alpha release that I will be looking to get feedback from you all about, not a statement of, this is what it does now and forever. If you don't like it, screw you. That's really not what this is. So I'm just talking about like what is the what is the current state of what I've built for the 081 alpha. So the current state of that with regards to pause is that my thinking about pause is that when you want to pause, you really want it to like immediately pause. You don't want it to like keep playing longer past, when you paused it. So the current design of pause is that it doesn't like slowly fade out. The current design of pause is that when you pause, it just immediately cuts. It just immediately stops exactly where you were. So if you want to finely control, like I want to pause the sound right before the dragon roars, and then I want to unpause it when I want the dragon to roar, that would give you the ability to really like immediately stop, immediately start. So if I play like Cyberpunk War, for example, it's getting into it here. I'm going to pause it, and it's just an immediate pause. And then when I resume, it will resume from exactly that place. So all of that being said, that's kind of the current design. Now, I understand that there would be a use case that people would have of wanting to sort of do like a soft pause where you pause and it fades out. But that isn't the current design. Now, the resume is not supposed to be fading in. So what you're hearing there is a bug that needs to be fixed before the alpha gets released. So it is supposed to be a immediate pause and an immediate restart at the volume level that it is configured to be. So the fact that it was like fading back in when you resumed it, that is something that needs to be addressed. Now, I see some people saying it's nice. I like that it fades back in when you unpause it. And I agree. I think it depends a lot on your use case. And so, I think, it needs some testing feedback to decide like, what is it really that we as a user community want for the software to do? And then, of course, there will always be awesome modules like, Blitz's soundboard or other, other modules that will provide that like advanced layer of audio playback tools that will probably give, well, not probably, that will give extra options for those of you who want, different solutions. Okay, so that's playing and pausing. I showed shuffling and fading. So I think that pretty much covers fade, where I think that, the gentle fade in, the gentle fade out is just a really nice feature that, I don't know, I think it just sounds really smooth. So I hope you all really love it when you get the chance to try it yourselves as well. Okay, I see a lot of questions. I think this is a good point for me to try and take a couple. There's more to get into with audio features, but maybe it's a good time for me to take a couple of questions. Not too many, because there's a lot more to cover still. Would the play, pause, and next previous buttons on a keyboard work? Good question, Lupus Malice. I have not implemented that yet. I haven't. I looked at it briefly, and it looked a little bit tricky to get the right input from that device, and I wasn't sure how different different devices would be in terms of what that input looks like. I've got like a keyboard that has some of those buttons that I could test with, and in my own quick testing it was not super straightforward, but I do think it would be nice eventually to allow for playback control, like play, pause, next, previous, to have those peripheral devices that have those sorts of buttons be able to control the playlists in Foundry. That's not something I was able to accomplish easily or in a way that was straightforward or clear to me. So I think that's definitely something that is a possibility for the future, but not something that I was able to do for this version. I see some people saying like maybe a modifier key when you pause to determine whether it fades or is abrupt. I actually think that's a really nice suggestion that might be a way to provide both options without further configuration. So I kind of like that suggestion, and that's given me a good idea to think about playing around with. So thank you for that. So Mead Gendar asks, question, current system, my players have issues controlling volume to a point where I have to kill the music. Will the function be enhanced moving forward? I mean, this whole thing that I've been showing is that function being enhanced. The underlying audio playback system has been redesigned so that when you control the audio slider, you are the what that is doing under the hood is now different. So if I connect as a player here, let me connect as a player to this scene. And what I'm going to do over on the GM view is I'm going to put my the playlist volume on the GM side, I'm going to put that to 0. Now, how does this work with player level connectivity? So for the player, this sound, Isolated Planet, is the one that's currently playing. Now, if the GM adjusts the volume of the track, you'll hear and see that the volume of the track on the player side is adjusting. So GM changes to volume, those are going to go out to everyone, right? Now note that on the right side, which is my GM view, I have the sound currently muted. So what you're hearing on the stream right now, this is the sound that the player side is hearing. If I mute the player side, then you don't hear anything. So the player can control the global volume level of playlists that just affects the player. The GM can control the global volume layer of playlists that just affects the GM. So everyone has their own global volume slider, which is really useful. Now, what the player can also do is adjust the track level volume. So you'll hear now that the player, I can make the individual track loud or soft, but those player level changes are only affecting the player. So they allow for the player to customize the volume level on their end. It doesn't feed back, like it's not actually forcing that volume change on anyone else. So for the player, you're just adjusting the volume for yourself locally. Yeah. The 3-second difference in where the track is for the player versus the GM was because I had already, it was already playing for a minute and the player had to load it. So that's where like preloading would come in handy. If I stop the track playing and then start it up again, you'll notice that the playback, where was it? Isolated Planet. The playback timeline, when everyone has loaded the track, the playback timeline for the player and for the DM, it's going to be pretty much exactly in sync. If a player hasn't loaded the audio yet, by the time that it's starting, like they might be a little bit behind, but yeah. Good suggestion about maybe track names that are either hidden from players or the ability to customize like a mysterious track name that the player sees that's different from the true track name. I think that's a nice suggestion. Hopefully, if one of my moderators or helpers is listening in, they can jot that down as notes for me so that I don't forget. That and the whole shift clicking to pause with fade. I think those are nice little ideas. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question, but I think player volume control should be much better behaved now than it was previously. I think the new system is far more robust, and it is handling things really nicely. So hopefully you will find this to be a big improvement. All right. Okay, there's lots more good questions that I could answer, although I am going to continue on because there's obviously like a lot to cover, and we're already like an hour in. So I'm just gonna keep pushing on with showcasing the features here. Thank you for your good questions, though. I would answer more if I didn't know how much more stuff I still needed to talk about. So I see a couple of questions about audio formats. I guess this is as good a time as any to address those. There's 2 changes to audio formats. M4A is now supported, as well as Opus. So those are 2 new input audio formats, M4A and Opus, that can be used in addition to the existing set of audio formats that are supported by the software. So that brings the overall, let's see, what does that bring it to? So that makes the overall audio file extensions FLAC, M4A, where to go? FLAC, M4A, MP3, OGG, Opus, WAVE, and WebM are all now supported audio types. All right, let's see here. So that's that. So I already showed skipping tracks for sequentialed and shuffled playlists. There's internal logical handling that's been improved with playlists where, by definition, only one sound should be playing at a time. So if your playlist type is either shuffle or sequential, then by definition, you're only intended to have one sound playing in that playlist at a given time. It's not intended to have multiple sounds playing. Now in 079, it could get into a situation where like sometimes the playlist would get stuck with like multiple sounds playing in the playlist when really only one should be playing. And so now that there's some extra logical handling to prevent that. So you'll notice that Soul Knife is the track that is currently playing over here. If I were to say go and click After the War and start a new track playing, it will automatically transition from Soul Knife to the new track, and Soul Knife will stop playing automatically. So it's fewer clicks. So if I start playing After the War, Soul Knife fades out, After the War fades in, and this kind of ensures that only one track within the playlist is playing at a given time. Now that only applies to playlists that are of the sequential or shuffled type. If you have playlists that are of the simultaneous or soundboard type, you can have as many sounds within those playlists playing at the same time as you want. Yeah, but that's what that means. I already talked about descriptions for playlists and playlist sounds, so that's handy. The way that shuffled playlists are synchronized for multiple players has been redesigned. So now there's an extra server-side piece of data that is stored to ensure that the randomization order for shuffled playlists is guaranteed to be the same for all players. Now previously, most of the time, the vast majority of the time was, but the way that I was handling like synchronized shuffle order previously, it was not great. It was kind of working, but it wasn't always working, and it always sucks when like you have two different people who are hearing two different sounds. Like that's a horrible experience. So the new approach is that the shuffle order is persisted in a certain way in the database so that it can guarantee that everyone is experiencing shuffling in the same sequence. Oops. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so here's a new one. So what's a good piece of music for this scene? I think maybe The Frontier, maybe? Yeah, Frontier seems a nice one. So here's a new feature. When you are configuring a scene, say I'm configuring the snow-shrouded crossroads, previously you could select a playlist that would automatically begin playing for this particular scene. Now, in addition to selecting a playlist, for the scene, you can also select a specific track of a playlist for the scene. So if I were to set, say, tabletop RPG music as the playlist for the scene, I can optionally, you don't have to, you can just choose a playlist overall, but if you want to, you can choose a particular track of that playlist. So when I choose a playlist, like Michael Ghelfi music, I can then choose a particular track, or Michael Ghelfi's ambience, I could say, snowing. I want it to be snowing on this particular scene, and then it would automatically just play that one particular track when the scene is activated. Now, the ambiences maybe makes a lot of sense as what you would use this for, but I'm going to set it to a piece of music just because for demo purposes, it's easier to hear how that works. So suppose I set it to tabletop RPG music, I'll set it to The Frontier. Now what happens if I'll get another scene here, I'll do, council chambers. If I switch to the council chambers, then the Frontier sound that was previously playing is going to automatically stop because that was the designated track of the snow-shrouded crossroads. But if I switch back to snow-shrouded crossroads, then the Frontier track is going to automatically start playing as soon as I make that switch. So you can, as I mentioned, you can still just, and there is a fade when switching. So when I switch it, you'll hear that it fades out. It's not an immediate stop. I switch the scene, the audio fades out. I switch the scene back, the audio fades in. So it's all very, very nice, very smooth. Okay, you can still, of course, just set an entire playlist. You can, of course, set an entire playlist as well, in which case, say if I set like Michael Ghelfi music as the playlist for council chambers, then when I switch to council chambers, it's going to play the overall playlist, just choosing a random track off of the shuffle. So it still stopped the Frontier track from tabletop RPG music, and it just started playing one of Michael's tracks at random. So you can either have it using an entire playlist as the target for the scene or a specific singular track. And switching back and forth will handle the automatic, starting and stopping for you, so you don't have to micromanage that at all during your session. This one is a bit of a lie. I can't demo this yet. This is one of the pieces that I am still... Well, actually, no, this one's right. So by default now, playlists are displayed in alphabetical order of the track names, where previously it was a bit random, the track order. That was like stupid and frustrating. So playlist tracks are now in alphabetical order by default. You will also be able to customize the track order, although I can't demo that for you yet. I showed the filtering, that playlists can now be filtered by name. Myriadis says it didn't fade out, and the reason for that is because I don't actually have any fade duration configured for Michael's music soundtrack. So that actually is sort of the software working as intended, where for Michael's, like, remember, you have to, it doesn't always fade. It doesn't always fade. You have to configure it if you want it to fade. So by default, the fading won't happen unless you set your playlist to fade. For Michael's playlist, it's not set, so that if I play this music, it just starts without a fade and it stops without a fade. So that's why you didn't hear one there. Let's see. So I talked about the filtering, the new file types. So I think that's it for the playlist audio features. I want to see what else might be in here. Let me demo. Okay, so I've still got two major features to cover. One is ambient audio, where you've seen all of the improvements to playlist audio. There are also some very exciting improvements to ambient audio that are coming up. So it's not just playlists that got a redesign for audio. It is also ambience that got a redesign for audio, and I'm excited to show that one to you next. I also have some big dice improvements that I want to also show. So one last thing before I take a break and do the license key giveaway is I promised I'd show you the bulk importing of audio. So let's do that. Let's create a playlist here. Let's create a new music playlist. Let's call it, let's do Darkest Dungeon. I don't want to actually, I love Darkest Dungeon as a game. I'm sure many of you do too. I'm not going to play the music because, it's not my audio, but I will show you what it would be like to set up, say you own the Darkest Dungeon soundtrack, which I do, and I wanted to set up that soundtrack to use in my game. What I might do is go to edit the playlist. Then I can go to bulk import. Now I've got my Darkest Dungeon soundtrack available somewhere that I want to use it. So I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna grab my Darkest Dungeon soundtrack, and I'm just gonna, I select the folder, select it, and boom, there it is. All of the tracks of my Darkest Dungeon soundtrack. Now the naming, the automatic naming, not perfect. I'm hoping to improve that still a little bit in terms of like parsing the file names and then translating them into like human readable names. But in terms of the underlying data structures and stuff, it handled setting all of that up for you. Now, hopefully I'll still get the file naming a little bit better before I release this. But yeah, very easy to create an entire playlist from a folder full of audio data. So hopefully that's exciting as a quality of life for you all. I'm going to make a couple of notes of things that I've noticed on this, just so that I don't forget them. Hopefully some of my moderators can help me remember that one as well. Improving the automatic naming of sounds created by the bulk importer. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, and of course you can edit the names after the fact, so you can tidy the names up after the importing process. All right. Next order of business. Saleha asks a great question, which is, what about using the title info from metadata for the initial names of tracks? That would be a very good solution, if not for one fatal flaw there, which is in order to use the metadata, I would have to actually load the file, or at least part of it. And so I think it's better to do the automatic naming based on the file name, because it avoids needing to actually load all of those audio files. It can just use the file name, which it knows about. Now, I might be able to make a setting in the future to, like, read the file metadata and, like, update the track based on that. But I think doing that automatically would be dangerous, because if someone were to, like, bulk import a folder that has like 300 sounds in it, they might be then in for a very bad time if it tried to get that for everything. But yeah, I think it's a suggestion that's worth looking into, perhaps. All right. So next up, before I get into spaces in file names are not recommended, but they are supported. So if you have spaces in your audio file names, that will be just fine. It will work, although it is not recommended that you do that, but it will work. All right, so I'm going to do a little giveaway now, because there's like 600 of you here watching, which is absolutely incredible. I am overwhelmed with your support of wanting to just watch me kind of sit around and talk about Foundry. So thank you all for that. That's awesome. I'm going to do a giveaway by grabbing the list of those of you who are currently watching in Twitch, and I'm going to set up a big old rollable table with many, many, many entries for all of you. And I will roll on that table to give away a couple of license keys. So all you have to do, as Anathema has been posting in chat, is you just have to be here and you have to be signed in. You have to be logged in to Twitch so that you actually show up in the list. But if you're logged in, just be here. I'm going to go grab your username and set up a table, and we'll see who our lucky winner is. I will be back. I'm not actually going anywhere, but I'm going to put like an AFK screen up while I set up the table. And then I will be back to showcase some of the remaining features in just a minute. Ooh, I don't know if I did that right. Okay, it does say I'm not here. I am actually here, but I'm going to mute for a minute while I set up that table, and I will be back in just a moment. Gets me every time. Sorry, folks. I am back. I have grabbed your usernames off of the Twitch list, and I've used a handy little macro that I have to create a rollable table that has 535 participants in it. Wow. The good old D535. I don't know what that is. I'm trying to think. That's got to have some ungodly Roman numeral name of what a, let's see, penta tri deca pentahedron or something. So yeah, we're gonna give that a big old roll, and I'm going to draw. Very difficult to balance. It's basically a big sphere. Very precision crafted. We'll see if we can get pixels, the pixels dice, to make us a D535 maybe. I'm sure that would be really a smart investment for them to do. We will. I'm going to give away. I don't know. We'll give away. I haven't streamed in a little while. I'm going to give away 3 licenses today. So there will be 3 lucky winners. There's so many of you here to support me. I think I need to at least do. I need to do more than just 2. We'll do 3. We'll do 3 licenses today, and I'm gonna go ahead and roll 3 times on this table. And what you need to do is, if you are selected, please respond in Twitch chat and either say I accept. Well, just say something to denote whether you want to accept. Or if for any reason you want to pass on the reward, you can also pass, in which case I will re-roll. I'm going to go ahead and do this now. So use your inspiration, use your luck points, use those bennies, whatever your way of hedging the odds are in your favor. May the dice gods be with you, and here we go. Oh, here we go. Please tell me I don't have a failure to launch. Oh my gosh, I have a failure to launch. So I told you about those dice improvements, didn't I? Wow, that's great. I told you about those dice improvements. Well, with dice improvements come dice bugs, I guess. Let's give it a good old manual roll, and I'll have to look into why the dice system busted up on me. We'll give it a D. We'll roll a 3D 535. All right. Sorry, folks. I thought I would have a better animation for you. All right, we got 3 winners. That's so classic. We got 457, which is tabletops and anvils. Tabletops and anvils. You are the first winner. Second winner, 495, is, let's see here, Trista Dea Bellard. Trista Dea Bellard. I'm just going to kind of rush it out there and hope I'm getting it almost right. Trista Dea Bellard. The third winner, number 425, we've got Shemetz. Shemetz. If you are here, the 3 of you are the potential winners. I'm going to put those in chat so that I remember. Shemetz. We've got tabletops and anvils. And we've got Trista Dea Bellard. Let's see, do we have any acceptances from our winners? With dice improvements come dice responsibility. Yeah, embarrassed that I didn't catch that one in testing, but you never know. Obviously, there is some big change. Well, I won't say big changes, but there's some changes to the way that dice rolling is working in order to add some cool new features. And so I did test it with roll tables, but clearly didn't test it well enough, not with a 535-person table. I'm looking to see if we have any accepts. Scrolling. Still looking. Tabletops and anvils passes. Looks like. Thank you for your generosity. I mean, please remember, you can certainly gift your license as, you know, a gift to someone else. But I'm going to go ahead and roll another 1D 535, and we'll see who else we get. 309. Number 309. We've got... that would be Mestre Dedicado. Mestre Dedicado. Presumably one of our good Brazilian friends, who I would be very happy if they are the winner of a software license. If Mestre Dedicado is here, you are a winner, sir. Did we have any other accepts? I'm scrolling, I'm looking. I'm scrolling, I'm looking. I didn't see any other accepts. Right. Scrolling and looking. All right, I don't see anyone. We're rolling again. Why is it so hard to give away free stuff? It's so hard. So hard to give away free stuff. Shemetz accepts. Hooray! All right, that's good. So that's one down. That's one down. We still have two to give away, though. I'm going to assume that Tristadea Bellard has forfeited their chance to accept at this point. So I'm going to roll again. Here we go. Oh, can't have that. 309 again. What are the odds? 288. Well, I could actually tell you exactly what the odds are. 1 in 535. Let's see. But to get them twice in a row, very rare. Oh, maybe another Brazilian. Macarena Taco. I'm trying too hard. I'm trying too hard to hope that these winners are Brazilians. Macarena Taco. Macarena Taco. Oh, Mestre Dedicado. It looks like everyone bandwagoned him until he showed up to accept his prize. Congratulations. You were just in time. Happy for you. So we've got Shemetz, we've got Mestre Dedicado. I'm looking for one more winner, Macarena Taco. It could be you if you accept. Don't leave me hanging here. I'm sorry, TP Kill. I really tried. Macarena Taco passed. All right, let's try again. 141. We're going up the list. 141. Oh, Foswi. I don't know, are Foundry helpers? Yeah, sure, why not? Why not? I can't penalize you for that. Foswi, Martin. Would you like a software license for yourself or for a friend, or shall I roll again? He passes. Very generous of you, sir. Thank you. Number 50. Number 50. All right, what do we got? Brunch with Broadway. Brunch with Broadway. A Brunch with Broadway. Do you accept a Foundry Virtual Tabletop software license for yourself or for a friend? Or shall I re-roll? All right, trying to give it away. This is taking longer than the talk itself. You're absolutely right, Cobalt. Well, you know, I like using the rollable tables, although this time that the dice didn't work for it, I'm, you know, much less fond of the idea. It's so nice just being able to click roll and it does like the scroll and it flashes and, you know, it's not in chat. Okay, sorry, Brunch with Broadway. Here we go again. 186. That is going to be the lucky winner named Ice Bones Jones. The fearsome skeletal pirate from beyond the northern ice. Fear the wrathful gaze of Ice Bones Jones. Ice Bones Jones accepts. Congratulations, sir. I hope you use your Foundry license to run many frigid pirate adventures. All right, congratulations to the winners. What you need to do is to make sure you have a user account on the Foundry Virtual Tabletop website. If you already have one, you're set. If you don't have one, please register one. And then send me a direct message on Twitch and remind me that you are one of the winners, and give me your Foundry website username. And just send that to me in a DM on Twitch, and I will issue a license key to each of the three of you. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone else, for participating. I'm sorry for the 532 of you who did not win, but I hope that you're enjoying the stream nonetheless, and I'm excited to get into the next set of changes that I want to showcase for you. All right. So, second part of the stream, let's get into ambient audio. This is the next half of the audio improvement work that has been underway. So I'm going to stop the playlists so that you can hear more clearly what is going on. So in addition to playlist audio, ambient audio has also been improved. I'm going to take a note of that roll table bug while it's on my mind. Roll table, dice, total, and then okay. So ambient audio, as most of you hopefully know already, but if you do not, then I will certainly show you. You can place ambient audio effects on a scene using the audio layer. You can create an area within which the sounds of audio would be heard. Hey, thanks, Andyfon. That's very kind of you. So, you know, I'm not going to try and choose something that fits the map. I'll choose something that is obvious for your testing. I'll just make some drums play in this circle. So in this region, the way that ambient audio works is when a token enters the area, there is a sound effect that is playing while the token is in the relevant location. So this could be like a waterfall or a fire or, you know, a nest of harpies that are screeching and cawing, or could be the sound of running water where there's a burbling brook. There's lots of ways you can use ambient audio to make a certain place on the map have a sound when the characters go into it to explore it. So that system already existed, but there were some opportunities to really improve it as part of this update, because I was already, working on the underlying audio system. The ambient audio is also reworked to use the exact same web audio API that playlists use. And so that allows for ambient audio to have a lot of nice effects about kind of smoother fading in, smoother fading out, more reliable volume levels as tokens are moving through. So you'll hear, if I drag this token from one end of the audio all the way to the other, you'll hear it gradually fade in to the peak volume level that's, in fact, what I'll do is, just so that you can kind of see, well, no, that's okay. I'm just going to drag the token through and you'll hear the audio kind of rise and fall. I guess it's maybe better to show this with a sound that is constant. I wonder if, I guess the drums, it's kind of a little bit too, I wonder what a good, maybe rain and thunder or village marketplace could be good. I'm just thinking about maybe one of Michael's ambiences. Unfortunately, the token maybe moves a little bit too fast for it to really be super audible. But so there, now it's like kind of human voices. Yeah, there is a little bit of jitter on the shadows. That's something that I'm kind of working on. It's because of all of the frame refreshes as the token is moving. It's like recomputing sight, but it does cause like a little bit of stutter. I think that's something I'm going to be able to eliminate pretty soon. With keyboard movement, it's not quite as noticeable, but yeah, always little things to keep improving. Yeah, so the sound of the ambient audio is a lot smoother. Also, in terms of the configuration of it, there's a little bit more settings that can be set. Well, really, it's mostly one more setting. But actually, let me show something else first before I get into this. So I'm going to switch over to this council chamber map. Oh, I forgot there was a playlist that I set as the default for this one. I'm going to stop that. Okay, so here on the council chamber map, I've put a couple of audio sources for the purposes of doing a little demo here. So here in the middle of the room, I put some talking voices. And here by the fire, by the torches, I put some sound of crackling flames. So one of the things that's a little bit tricky in the current 07 version with ambient audio is you need a token to test the audio out. Or if you're just a game master and you're maybe controlling many different tokens, you don't necessarily, you kind of miss out on the audio landscape that the players are experiencing. So I was trying to think of what is a good way to handle this problem. And I explored a couple of different approaches, and the approach that I ended up settling on is that there is now a toggle mode that you can enable as the game master that will play ambient audio from the vantage point of your mouse cursor while that mode is enabled. So for example, here on the sounds layer, there's a new toggle button. It looks like these headphones. When I put the headphones on, I will start to hear the sound landscape from the perspective of wherever my mouse is. So I'm going to put this on, and I'm going to move it over to this fire torch. And as I move my mouse around and I get closer to the torch, the sound gets louder, just as if it would if it were from the perspective of a token. So if I go on the far side of the wall with my mouse, where the sound doesn't reach, the sound immediately cuts out. So for any position on the map, you'll be able to preview what that position sounds like for a token that is there. So in the middle of the map, I have this sound of human voices talking. In fact, you can also hear like the overlap of the voices talking and the fire. And so the audio landscape is pretty nuanced. I'm going to crank the volumes up just so it's a little bit more exaggerated. So I see someone saying you should change the mouse cursor icon. I might do that. Although what's useful for game masters with this tool is that it doesn't only work while you're on the audio layer. So you can put this toggle on, and then you can switch to a different layer. So maybe you're like working on walls or you're working on lights. You can leave that toggle on, and the whole time you'll be hearing audio for the ambience of your scene. So like, this is going to be nice for game masters because, you know, as a game master, you're not always controlling a token. You're not always, you know, maybe there's a bunch of bandits here in the council chambers. You're not always controlling a bandit. And so you're missing out on the ambient audio a lot of the time when you don't have a token controlled. So this allows you as a game master to be experiencing ambient audio just when you're running the game in a way that doesn't require you to have a particular token in place. Now, that being said, when you do control a particular token, that supersedes the position of your mouse cursor. So when you have a token controlled, it is the token's position that is going to inform what audio you're hearing. So like I have this token controlled over by this flame. I'm hearing the flame, but not the speaking voices in the council chamber. If I unselect the token, then it goes back to letting me hear audio based on where my mouse cursor is. So this was the solution that I came up with for like how to let game masters better experience audio. Now for players, it's not as much of an issue because the player always has a character that is the one that is like informing what they hear. So yeah, this is a feature that I'm really excited about as a DM because I put a lot of work sometimes into like the audio landscape of my maps, but I just wasn't enjoying that as much during the session because I didn't have a token that I was controlling. So yeah, when you have multiple tokens controlled, what you hear is the union, like how vision works, what you hear is the union of all tokens. So here I have one bandit that's right by the fireplace over here, and I have this acolyte that's right at the center of the council chamber. So both the fire sound is loud and the people talking is loud. So when I have multiple tokens controlled, then the audio is based on the union of those listeners. So that's one of the big improvements with ambient audio. There are a couple of other neat improvements with ambient audio that I want to share. like the lighting engine, where this is not a new feature, by the way, this is not a new feature, just emphasizing it. You can right-click a light source to turn that light source on and off. You can now, as the game master, do the same thing for audio. Now, what is new about this feature is the UI of doing this is changed. So there's a different icon. The icon changes and it goes to red like this, so it's easier to see which lights are currently disabled. Easier to see, easier to control that. So the interface, like the UI UX of disabling lights is improved, but the functionality is not new. But that I think it makes it more obvious that the light is off. Now the new bit is that you can do the same thing for sounds. So I can turn a sound. I can turn a sound off or on. And it's pretty clear the field of effect. I might actually remove the field entirely when it's off. I'm kind of thinking about, like, the way that the light works is it sort of shows you the field, but it removes the glow. So I might do something more similar with sound, where instead of filling it red, I might just leave the outer outline. But that's a little note for me as we get from alpha to non-alpha. But the functionality is there that this will disable the sound. So if I put my live preview on, put my live audio preview toggle on, so now I'm hearing the torch. I'm hearing this like fire crackle sound. If I right click it, it just cuts off. So if you want to have little audio effects that kind of come on or come off, then you'll get that. So that's another new feature. Let's see. Another new feature that I want to showcase is I have changed the way that the darkness level works with lights. And as I will show you, consequently, how it works with sounds as well. So previously, for each light source, you could specify a darkness threshold where that light would come on when darkness exceeds that point. Now, that feature was kind of specifically designed with nighttime lights in mind. And I think that is the most common use case. But one of the consequences of doing it that way is that it didn't provide the possibility for a light source that was specifically on in the day, but not in the night. So there were valid use cases for that as well. So you could imagine like a sun, the sun gleaming off of some highly reflective object that would make like a sparkling light animation or something, and you would expect that to be visible during the daytime, but not during the nighttime. So that was a limitation of something like you couldn't do with the previous system. So the way that darkness threshold was implemented has been redesigned to, instead of be a darkness threshold, is now a darkness activation range. So what the darkness activation range allows you to do is fine-tune the range of that darkness value that for which that light will be active. So more darkness is like closer to night. So to kind of reproduce the behavior of the old system, I might set darkness range to like 0.5 to 1. So when darkness is between 0.5 and 1, this light should be active. And here it's at 0.5, so it's active. But if I nudge it down to 0.45, you'll see that light goes inactive. The UX of this has been improved so that it's no longer the red X icon, but it does switch the icon to a little X. So you can tell that light is not currently active based on the darkness level. So you get better feedback there. And so this would be kind of what happens when the darkness goes from 0, it goes to past 5, and so then this like big torch gets lit. And so that you could do it in the old version. This is not strictly new, although the change to the icon is new. Now, what you couldn't do before is have the kind of inverse of this. Suppose, for whatever reason, what caused that music to start? Oh, it's because, I see. I'm going to take the default playlist off this scene because I forgot I still had a default playlist on this scene. What wasn't previously possible was the inverse of that. So suppose, like, I want to say, during the day and only during the day, there is a big red glowy dome around of force field around this center table. And, suppose that force field is only present during the daytime. Now, I can do that now by, instead of doing like 0.5 to 1 as the darkness activation range, I could do like between 0 and 0.5, which would be then during the daytime, during the more illuminated period of the day, that light source would be active. So if I, for example, transition this scene to daytime, you'll notice that as the light level increases, then my dome light source here comes online after a certain point. So this was something you couldn't do before, and it was a little bit of a limitation, and now you can, because the redefinition of this as a range of like between A and B allows you to do some different cool things with that. Now, I might not have done this on its own if it weren't for the improvements to sound, because with lights, it's much more common for a light source to be on at night than in the day. But with sounds, it is not any more one than the other. You would definitely have, during the daytime, certain sounds that you would want to have playing that would be different than the sounds at night. So suppose we want our chatter of all of the people in this council chamber. Suppose we want that sound of those voices having that conversation. Suppose we only want those voices to be present during the daytime. I can configure now a darkness activation range for the sound so that I hear these speaking voices during the daytime. But if I transition the scene back to night, you'll hear at some point those voices cut out. Yep, so you hear at some point those voices faded out, and now that it's nighttime, there is no longer the sound of like bustling voices in the council chamber. We'll go back to daytime. And at some point, those voices return. So the darkness activation range is now supported for these both light sources and audio sources, and they can allow you to craft these kind of more dynamic environments where there's certain sounds during the day, certain sounds at night. So if I were to, like in my snow-shrouded crossroads, if I were to put birds chirping in the trees during the day, but the howling of wolves in a certain location at night, I could create these soundscapes so that when the environment goes from daytime to nighttime and then back to daytime, the soundscape of the owls is a great idea. The soundscape of the scene would also change according to the darkness level. Okay, so that, I think, is the crux of the improvements for for ambient audio. I've got one other major topic which has to do with the dice system, but at this point I've been talking about audio for a long time, so I'm going to take a couple questions from people specific to audio. So if you have some specific questions about anything I just showed or about other aspects of the audio system, let me know what I can answer for you. Oh, the walls thing. Dicey reminded me of a big feature I didn't talk about. Sorry, I knew I was forgetting something. Yeah, belay that. There's one other feature I need to talk about before I take questions. Yeah, I forgot. That's a big feature. So here's just a blank scene with some walls. Previously, when configuring a wall or a group of walls, there was a field for movement restriction as well as a field for sensory restriction. Now, what that meant was that previously both vision and sound were regulated by the same wall parameter of perception restriction, which, was okay, but it meant that there's a large number of real-world surfaces or barriers or materials that couldn't be faithfully modeled by Foundry as permitting one but not the other. So what you can have now is separate configuration for sight restriction and sound restriction. So when sight restriction and sound restriction are both normal, the sound is contained within the square, as well as vision being contained within the square. So both vision and sound are contained within. Conversely, when sound restriction is, let's see here, what was it that I was intending to do with this one? So I'm going to make all of these walls sound restriction limited. Yeah. So here's an example, and there's a light source in each of these squares as well. So here's a example where I've got what effectively amounts towards terrain walls, but only for the purposes of sound. Terrain walls is like kind of for vision, but now there's like many more combinations that can be supported. So here, if I configure sound to be limited, but sight to be normal, you'll notice that the light is being constrained by the inner box. The light source, I'll make the light source like color. The light is constrained within the inner box, but the sound is able to get to the outer box. So this is like the way that a terrain wall works for the purposes of vision, where the token will hear the audio outside of the inner square, as well as within the inner square, but not outside the outer square. So yeah, just like terrain walls work for sight, so too limited will achieve this for sound. Now the last mode here is, let's see, what am I trying to do here? So you might have a set of walls where there is no, I showed normal, I showed limited. You might also have walls where there is no sound restriction, but there is sight restriction. So in this case, you might have, say, a light source that is blocked by the walls, but the sound is able to come through. So here I'm still outside the wall, but I'm hearing sounds that are coming from within. So you could be able to configure like maybe it's like a tent. You could imagine there being like a tent where the fabric you're able to hear what's happening inside the tent, but you can't see what is happening inside the tent. So there's a lot of like creative ways that you can, now that this is separated out, you can use this to configure different material types that would affect, what passes through them, whether you physically pass through them, yes or no, whether you can look through them, yes or no, whether you can hear through them, yes or no. So different senses now have their own different channels in terms of the wall configuration. All right, so yeah, that was a big feature that I did not speak about. So I thank you for the reminder that feature existed, that I needed to talk about it. Yeah, so this is something that for map makers, for content creators, for map makers, for DMs, you'll have a lot more tools you can play with, because you can model these materials differently, and it gives you all the more reason to incorporate sound as a key component of your scenes, your landscape, your world that you build. Okay, so that's that. Now let's go to questions. All right, Cage asks, certain scenes, movie files can include audio. Current Foundry has no way of adjusting the volume or disabling the sound. You can adjust the volume. Built-in volume that is part of a background movie is controlled by the ambient volume slider. Now, the disadvantage of that is this global slider controls all volume. So what I would like to do, and I haven't done it yet, but Cage, this is a great one for the suggestion log that hopefully I can add before 0.8 reaches release, is if you're using a video background that has an audio channel, I would love to show a separate slider for that you can adjust it independently of other ambient sources. Now that isn't something that exists yet, but I agree with you that what you're describing is problematic. And so what I would love to do is provide a way to handle that better. Just to be clear, that's not something I've done yet, but yes, if the video background includes an audio component, I would like to provide a slider to configure the volume of that. Next question. Someone asking about external audio links. External audio links should be totally fine as long as they support cross-origin resource sharing. If your external links are working now in 0.7.9, they will continue to work in 0.8. That will continue, that you can use web URLs to online audio sources. FP2AV asks for a way for sound to go around corners. Probably not the way you're imagining. I think what you're imagining is something that models the physics of like a sound wave rebounding off of a wall and like bouncing. That's a bridge too far for the software right now. Maybe in the future. What you can do, of course, now that walls can separately configure for vision restriction versus audio restriction, is you could make the walls of your corner limit vision and movement but not limit sound. So like, for example, if I were to say I've got this fire sound here, right? Say I were to take just a couple of these walls, like right here, maybe these three, I could make these three walls have no sound restriction. And if I made these three walls specifically have no sound restriction, then the sound of this crackling fireplace would sort of stay with me as I go around the corner, where otherwise it would get collided away by the walls. Maybe I need this one too. So while there's not a way to do that, like sound is rebounding off walls and bouncing around the corners, you can approximate it by just choosing some walls to strategically have not block sound. And by changing a couple of walls to not block sound, you can, I think, reasonably approximate the way that sound would kind of follow around a corner. So yeah, that won't always work for every situation, especially if you have a lot of sound effects. You know, it's not perfect, but I think it's a lot better than it was. Do ambient sounds fade when switching between daylight or instant based on the threshold? It's a fade. It's a little bit of fade when they come in based on that threshold. Can you fade on right-click disable ambient audio? I think it does. Let's see. Maybe. I guess it's a very short fade. It's a very short fade. I don't have that configurable right now. There is, I think it's like 100 millisecond ramp or something, just so it's not super abrupt, but it is a very brief fade when it enables or disables. Question from Lupus Malice. Any plans on adding support for rewinding, skipping forward in a song in a playlist? So I'm using web audio buffer nodes that they don't have, the seeking capabilities are a little bit limited. Now it is possible to do it. The underlying APIs that Foundry is relying on will allow for seeking to a different point in the audio track. It's not something that I have in my plans right now, but it is something that a module that wants to further enhance these sound features could add support for, to have a bar that would allow you to seek to a certain position in the track. The underlying technology makes it possible, but it's not part of my current design goals for this iteration. St. Baylor, would it be possible in the future to feature audio playback from cloud services like Wonder? Yes, so St. Baylor, those URLs will already work as long as they are accessible by Foundry. So as long as they're not private, as long as they're not, password protected or anything. Like as long as Foundry can access that audio file, you absolutely can use audio sources from Google Drive, Dropbox, what have you. I put all of my audio in S3, but wherever you want to store your audio files, as long as Foundry can access the raw file, you can use that URL. Rolhinho asks, the bug about loading 3 to 6 audios when trying to play another audio. Let's demo this. So there is a problem in current Foundry where if you play a lot of audio, you eventually exhaust a HTML5 streaming pool, which the browser itself is limited in terms of the number of concurrent connections that it can support. So if you're playing a lot of audio all at the same time, that can get you in trouble. Brace yourselves. Let's show what this currently does. Let's do a little demo here. I'm going to change this playlist mode to soundboard. So here we go. We're going to make a righteous cacophony. I hope you guys are ready to turn your speakers down. Oh, let's just... I'm sorry, tabletop RPG music. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. So here we have about 30 different sounds that are playing simultaneously. So hopefully that answers your question about what Foundry can support. Let's get these turned off. I won't subject you all to that any longer than strictly necessary. All right, I'm skipping up to current because I've missed a lot of questions. I see someone asking about a stop all button. Of course, there is a stop all. Like what I should have done is changed it to simultaneous playback. That would have sped things up. I can play all of them with a single button click. If you want that to be your use case where everything plays or everything doesn't play, simultaneous is the right way to go. Yeah. Okay. No more audio torture. Okay. Does the new audio do gapless looping better? I think it does, yes, Nudos. Whether you will feel that your audio is able to, loop with a completely seamless thing or not. So here's one that I have. I was using this for crossfading. Here's like a snippet of sound. It's only like 17 seconds long. I'll just set it to loop. It's not going to loop. Like you're going to be able to, it's not designed. This is not a piece of audio that's designed to loop. So there will be like a jar when it loops, but you'll see when it reaches 10 seconds, it will loop. Whether or not you feel that looping is seamless or not, I think it depends a lot on the audio file. Obviously, like audio files that are specifically designed for looping, they're designed in a very specific way where the waveform at the end of the audio should, probably end with a zero crossing, and it should end in a place that's designed to naturally carry into the start of the audio, and so you wouldn't have a click or a pop or anything. A lot of times where you feel like a looping audio is not seamless, it's because the actual audio file is not well designed to have a zero crossing right at the beginning and right at the end, and so there's a sudden pop. If the audio file is designed for it, the looping in Foundry should be entirely seamless. If the audio file is not designed for it, you may hear a bit of a seam. I think it depends a little bit on that. All right, let's see. Hey, thanks, Troll Lord. Appreciate you dropping by. Love the folks over at Troll Lord Games. Very, very cool creators. Can't wait to see some of y'all's stuff for Foundry. I hope that'll be something we can share soon. Let's see. Can we expect each scene with more options of sounds like background sound and battle theme? Maybe, Samir, although I feel good about the tools that Foundry offers now in terms of like supporting well-structured audio with playback. So I think a tool to craft a more rich soundscape for the scene with like a background theme, a battle theme, stuff like that. To me, that sounds like a great module idea rather than a great idea for the core software. I think there could be like a scene soundscaper module that would allow you to use this system with a different interface that would allow you to set up like a multi-layered soundscape for your scene. And I think that's an awesome module idea that I fully expect some of the creative module developers in the community to do some stuff like that. That's already possible with some modules like Soundboard. So, there's already some options like that. Chuki asks about Firefox. All of this stuff is working great in Firefox as far as I can tell. We've been testing in both Chrome and Firefox and Edge, and also, Safari, the tech preview is also working pretty well, although that's gotten less testing so far. FP2AV, any features unrelated to sound? Yes, definitely. I've just been focusing on sound so far in this stream. Shirky asks about possible to set something up so you could make A/B loops in the songs. So I'm not really a sound engineer, so I apologize, Shirky, for revealing my ignorance here, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean about an A/B loop, but I'm thinking what that means is it's like a sprite where there's a certain like start time, stop time that you configure it to loop over a subset of the file. If that's what you mean, then yes, there are some tools in the API to support this. If that's not what you mean, then I'm not sure what you mean. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Thanks for all the good questions. There's many more questions I could answer, but I do want to talk a little bit about some other features. And so I'm at the like 2 hour and change mark, so I need to keep the pace going, or otherwise I may collapse from exhaustion on stream. I do want to, before I move on, I do want to showcase that for the developers in the audience, these audio systems that I've been showcasing are fully backed by 2 primary APIs. The first primary API is the audio helper, which governs audio playback across many sources. So this is what the current game audio object is. So game audio is a singleton instance of the audio helper. When there is audio playing or pending, this tracks the state of different audio playback. It gives you access to all of the low-level audio nodes of the Web Audio API so that you can directly engage with them. It gives you a cached list of buffers that have been constructed that are ready to use. It gives you the web audio context that you can use to do context-level options. Is very powerful. It's a very powerful centralized resource to tap into all of the different audio that's playing. So if I were to say play some couple of different songs, so maybe I'll play like one here, we'll get like an ambience going. There's like a couple of things playing right now. Looks like I've got some logging in there that I need to be sure to remove. I'll have to track that down. The game audio object has a map of the sound nodes that are currently playing that link into the document data structures that are causing them to play. So everything's connected. Game.audio, that is the singleton instance of this audio helper context that has all of this stuff. It's all documented in the audio helper docs in the API that I hope to continue improving with like examples and stuff, but this is in the alpha API docs. You'll be able to use this audio helper to get access to all of the underlying sound objects. Okay. Let's see. The other piece of the API that's very important for the developers in the room is the actual sound node. So sound node is a sort of interface on top of the Web Audio API that manages playback, loading, event flow, fading, volume control, looping. It has some very rich APIs in terms of applying a fade, adjusting the playback, adjusting the volume, starting, stopping, preloading. So you can use these sound node objects, pausing. You can schedule events, very powerful. You can schedule events to occur at a particular timestamp of an audio file. So suppose you have, like, let's just brainstorm a little module right now. Suppose you have a ambient audio sound of a battle, and then at 2 minutes and 37 seconds of your battle, you want to play a different sound of a dragon roaring. And then 10 seconds after that, you want to play the sound of screaming people running away. You can use the scheduling API as part of the sound nodes to schedule that exact timing of audio playback that you would want to have happen. So like there's really some incredible stuff that you can do with that, including things you can do in macros, for example. So like if you have a macro for like using a certain ability and you want to like play some audio effects that like werewolf transformation or something, you can do that. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. So this is a quite rich API. There's events you can listen to. So for a particular song, for a particular track, you can hook into when it either starts, pauses, stops, loops, or ends. You can schedule things for any of those events that you want to. There's lots of power here. That this is the layer on top of the web audio API that I've built that is going to give you lots of power to do lots of cool audio related things. So for the developers in the group, I hope you're excited to play around with that. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to cover just a few other features that are present in 081, although there are features that are in 081 that are not, that I won't have time to get into, but I do want to talk about the dice system. And this one is going to be a little bit more technical. So I saved it for last because this is a little bit more geared towards developers, I guess. There are a couple of dice features that are that will affect everyone, though. So the first one that I would like to share as an example is that you can annotate every element of, not every element, but you can annotate numeric terms in a dice expression. I'm probably getting ahead of myself by showing this, but I want to start with the stuff that will affect users. So for example, what you can do is like 2d20, keep highest, attack roll with advantage. I'm annotating this component of the attack roll. This is not new. You could do that for dice terms before, but say you have like a +3, you can annotate the 3 as saying like strength mod plus another 2, which you might say is like proficiency, plus 1d4, which might be from bless. And so when you roll this dice expression, you have annotated every term of the roll with its own term-specific flavor text. So what you couldn't do before is annotate strictly numeric terms. So like the 3 or the 4. Those were just plain numbers that couldn't accept that kind of annotation, that kind of flavor text. Now, how is that working under the hood? I'm going to pull up the console and I'm going to zoom in here. And I'm going to create some roles. So I'm going to create that same role equation just as an object in the API to show you a little bit of what's happening here. Because this is a big change. This is a big change. So I'm going to create this entire expression. Hopefully, let me move this up a little bit so I'm sure that you can see it so it's not underneath something. I'm going to create this role object using this role equation. And what happens with this role object is the terms that it's parsed into are now fully tokenized. So every term in the dice equation is its own type of object that has its own specialized representation. So for example, the fourth term, the numeric term that was the 2, has its own flavor that is associated with it, because instead of just being the number 4, this numeric term is now a numeric term object that has its own associated metadata and internal information. So this enriches what is possible within the dice rolling API, both by having better structure to the formula that are identified and parsed, but also by allowing more capabilities in terms of what individual terms of the expression are and how they can be represented, how they can be modified. So a consequence of this is that the dice parsing, the way that a formula is parsed into this object, is also, very much changed. So if I make a different role where, maybe I've got like a parenthetical term where this second bit is wrapped in parentheses, there is now this is parsed into a die term, an operator term, which is the plus, and then the parenthetical term, which is the entire parentheses bit. And when the roll is evaluated, then that roll is evaluated and the parenthetical term is recursively handled and recovered into its final result. So the parsing and the evaluation of dice formula is supercharged and much more powerful, much more reliable. You can do some pretty crazy stuff with wild expressions and math functions and stuff like that. So, suppose I'm just going to make something up, 3 minus parentheses floor parentheses 1d4 divided by 4 plus min of 3 and 1d6 times 7 close parentheses divided by parentheses 14 minus 3d8. Just some random expression like this is pretty complicated, gets parsed into parenthetical terms, operator terms, numeric terms, etc. When that is evaluated, it's handled recursively. All of the terms are evaluated, the formula is resolved. The final formula is recovered as 3 minus 22 divided by -7. And you get your correct total, same total that you would get if you were to, well, I guess this has dice terms in it, so you can't just evaluate it directly. But it's quite powerful. It is it's pretty strong what this can do. So for the developers in the group, what you should be looking for is that there are specific term types that you should be keeping an eye out for in the API. There are 5 term types, and then there are sub-term types that are also relevant. So the primary there are 7 term types. I lied to you. And each of these term types serves a different purpose. There is a dice term. I'll get back to that in a minute. That will look pretty familiar. That is what previously existed. There is a math term, which handles the evaluation of math functions. There is a numeric term, which is just a static number. There is an operator term, which these are arithmetic operators, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There are parenthetical terms, which wrap other expressions, and parenthetical terms are evaluated recursively. There are dice pool terms. So dice pools are like parentheticals, but they allow you to apply modifiers to the set of dice, like keeping, dropping, counting successes, counting failures, stuff like that. So there's a lot you can do with dice pools that is kind of for a set of rolls, perform some operation on the set. And then there are string terms, which are placeholders. So string terms are never evaluated. If you try and evaluate a string term, it will fail. But string terms are sort of stand-ins for portions of the dice expression which are not yet evaluated or combined properly. Why would you need a string term? Well, you can imagine a formula that previously would have been a nightmare for Foundry, like 3d4, d, 4d6, keep highest 1d4. So here you have like portions of a dice roll, each of which is dynamically determined. You're dynamically determining how many dice to roll. You're dynamically determining what size of dice to roll. You're dynamically determining how many of those dice to keep. This would have previously been untenable for Foundry, but the new parser is much smarter, much stronger. And so we see like that second string term that's in there is just the D. So like it's parsed this into, a couple of pieces, but it hasn't fully combined them yet. But it would be able to do that after it has been evaluated. So yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that hopefully will allow for lots more stuff to happen. So let me talk about some other user-facing consequences of the dice changes, since I'll alternate between like actual features and the kind of API stuff. Sorry, my voice is like starting to go just a little bit. Yeah, so I said term-specific flavor text. I talked about how the parsing is happening. So minimum and maximum. So that's a new thing that you can have. So for example, 4d6 min 3. This is a new modifier type that exists where you can roll 4d6, but you can't get less than a 3. So, could be like, I guess a classic example for that is like Elemental Adept, where, you can't roll a 1 on your damage roll or something. So like, you're rolling like an 8d6 fireball, but, every one of those is going to be at least 2. I don't know, maybe I'm getting the feat wrong or something, but like, you'll see here that the dice term for that has this minimum 2 modifier, and when the roll is evaluated, I don't know if we got any 1s, but yeah, so we got some 1s when we evaluated that roll. So any 1s that we got when evaluating that roll are going to instead count as 2s instead. So if I were to do that in the actual, chat log, like 8d6 min 2, I didn't get any 1s. Let's try again. I still didn't get any 1s. Wow. I'm good fireball rolling today. All right, there's some 1s. So 8d6 min 2, you would see these 1s are grayed out a little bit, and they got replaced with 2s when counting the total result. Now they still appear as 1s, so you can see that you rolled a 1, but they are grayed out to denote that they were replaced with a better result. Yeah, so that is the minimum. There's also a corresponding maximum option, although that's not something that I think is frequently used, but like 8d6 max 4. You can't get better than a 4, so your 5 that I rolled here was downgraded. Okay, so there's that. There's also counting even results and counting odd results. So for example, 10d10 even. It's a new modifier type, evens and odds. 10d10 even, it will count the number of evens that you get. So here we rolled 10d10s and we got 6 evens, that those are highlighted as successes. Or we can do 10d10 odd, and this will count the number of odd results. Oh, 9 of them. Only the 6 was not odd. And you can combine even and odd with other like count success, count failure, deduct successes, deduct failures. There's ways to combine, different things. This is important for certain game systems. There is also a option for a new modifier option for recursive rerolls. So normally if I do like 10d10 reroll less than 4, I'll roll 10d10s, and then I'll reroll only the initial set, any that were less than 4. So what I got here was of my first 10 that I rolled, I had a 3 and a 1, so I rolled 2 more dice. So that just is a single reroll. There is a new modifier, which is double R. So instead of 10d10 R for reroll, 10d10 double R for recursive reroll. That as long as I continue rolling results that are less than 4, I will continue rolling dice. So there I got like another 3. There's another 3. There's a 10, but there's a 1. So there, keep going. So like it's gonna keep re-rolling dice until every result, until we've run out of re-rolls. So on the last one, it ended up actually being a 7. So this ended up, continuing to re-roll dice until the condition was met. Avatar Rubix asks about infinite recursion. There is an internal safeguard where if you have too many re-rolls without achieving a final result, it will throw an error. And while the Dice So Nice animation is slow, the actual calculation of the rerolls is like instantaneous. So if you have infinite recursion, it will just error immediately. Or so I say. Let's see if I can crash my browser. So we'll try like 10d10 infinite reroll if it's less than 11, right? So in theory, this should, explode the universe. Let's see what happens. Watch my Twitch stream die or something. Oh, well, okay. I take it back. Now this should have failed, I think. I'm not sure actually why it didn't, although the universe has not ended, but it did actually attempt the roll. So I wonder why that is. Oh, you know what? It's because it's out of bounds. It's because the 11 is out of bounds. So it ignored 11 as the target. And I'm wondering what it did, though. I might have to look into that. But there should be a safeguard against that, because I remember writing this code. Now it might not be doing exactly what I thought it was doing, though. Now I'm a dog with a bone on this. I've got to go look it up. So let's see. Re-roll, recursive re-roll. I wonder if it's just like a Dice So Nice thing that's causing this to happen. Like there is a check for maximum recursion depth that if it evaluates more than 1,000, I mean, that's kind of an arbitrary number. There should be a check, but I don't know why. Oh, anyways, that's something for me to look into. I'll jot that down on my notes, or maybe one of the mods can do it. Can remind me to look into that. Okay, let's see. Any other dice mechanic changes? Minimum, maximum, evens and odds, recursive reroll. I think that's almost it. There is another little thing, which is for inline dice rolls. So here's a neat little thing in your journal. So you can now annotate inline rolls to name them. So here's a little example. So there's two different types of inline rolls. There's immediately evaluated and there's deferred. Immediately evaluated ends up looking like it's just when you open it, it's already been evaluated to a number, like you have 4. But what you can do now is that you can name them so that you can annotate like what an inline roll was, and it gets a nice little label. For deferred rolls, where it doesn't roll it until you click the button, the annotation turns the button into that label, and then it will include that as the flavor text in what you actually roll. So if I click the little button here to like roll for bless, it will roll my 1d4 and it will put bless as the flavor text on the resulting roll. So it's a little bit of an expanded syntax in terms of how you can annotate inline rolls to have a little bit more data associated with them. Yeah, so that's it for dice rolling. Obviously, the dice rolling stuff, well, that's not it for dice rolling. There's one very major feature for dice rolling that I need to mention, although it is pretty boring and it will only affect a very small number of you, which is that when you construct a roll, dice rolls are going to eventually be moving to be asynchronous. And the reason for that is that I need to support the option of having external sources of randomization as input to the Foundry dice system. This is for things like allowing for you to use a web service that produces dice rolls for you, allowing for you to use a physical device like the Pixels dice that we're partnering with to add Foundry support for, or like the module that Grape Juice is creating for detecting through machine learning, which is awesome, detecting with a webcam the results of dice that are rolled on a physical tabletop. Any ideas like this basically would require asynchronous dice rolling so that there is a mechanism to ask some external service to produce the roll and then to wait for that external service to return the result in order for the roll to be represented inside Foundry. So this is an important infrastructure enhancement. Now, it also is one that would have been a very breaking change if I made it immediately. So I worked with the folks in the League of Extraordinary Foundry Developers to figure out a migration plan for this. So in 0.8.1, dice rolling is still synchronous by default. So when I call r.evaluate, this is synchronous and it returns a roll synchronously. But it will, as you see here, it displays this warning message, roll evaluate is becoming asynchronous. In the short term, you may pass async equals true or async equals false to evaluation options to nominate your preferred behavior. What that means is that when I roll, I can explicitly opt. Now it's synchronous by default right now, but I could explicitly say async false, like so, and same behavior but no warning. So the warning appears if you don't specifically opt in. So if I don't specifically say async false, then it warns you that this thing is going to change on you. So I can explicitly say async false, same behavior, no warning. It's the default. Now, if I put async true, you'll notice that this is going to return a promise. So if I opt into async true, then instead of getting the roll back directly, you get a promise that resolves to that roll. And there's also no warning. Eventually, this will become the default behavior, that rolls will be async true, and when you evaluate them, they will return a promise, and that will be the default behavior. But it's going to take time for this to get migrated through where everyone who's calling dice rolls in their game systems and stuff can have time to adapt to this. So the schedule for the migration plan is that in 0.8, dice rolling is going to be synchronous by default with this warning. In 0.9, dice rolling is going to become async by default, but it will allow you to continue to get synchronous results by requesting async false. So it's already been evaluated. In 0.9, it's going to flip the default behavior, but you will still be able to produce synchronous rolls. And then in 0.10, the option of producing synchronous rolls will be removed, and you can only produce asynchronous rolls. So there's sort of a three-phased migration plan that for now, no changes are needed. By the time we get to 0.9, you will need to either specifically opt into async or opt out of async. And then by the time we get to 0.10, you have to be using async. So it's going to be a long time. It's going to be a process, but this is something that everyone who's creating modules will have to adapt to over time. So that is it. That's what I have. There's other like minor changes in 08.1, but it's been quite a while now, so I'm not going to get into some of the minor stuff. Everything else is pretty minor compared to what I've shown. So let's do about 20 minutes of questions, and then I think I'm going to become a potato for the rest of my Friday. Question from Dicey about will the 5e system be updated with the Dice API? Yeah, that will be the plan. I don't know if it will be right away in 1.3.0, but definitely I envision the way that the new Dice API works, it's going to let us change the way that things like attack rolls, saving throws, skill checks, it's going to change the way that those things are done. Well, it doesn't have to, but it can. And I have an idea in mind about a really exciting way to rewrite the way that dice rolls are handled in the 5e system to make better use of this API. And to, instead of just constructing a string that the roll object parses, actually construct the roll using the component parts by manually constructing those terms. So like, if you have advantage, construct a 2d20, keep highest term. If you have halfling lucky, add the, reroll onto that term. If you have elven accuracy, add a third dice if you already have advantage and it's a certain type of roll. And more like programmatically constructing the components of the roll from the game mechanics rather than programmatically constructing a string that then is parsed by the roll. So it would kind of turn the tables in terms of what the 5e system is going to do versus what the dice system is going to do. But I think that would put a lot more power in the hands of the 5e system, and it would allow all of those terms to be annotated in a really smart way that, I think that would be really great. And that's something that I envision doing, maybe not as part of the very next 5e update, but definitely as part of a subsequent one. Long answer for that. Very important question from Blue Sky Blackbird. If I could choose not to become a potato, would I rather become a lemon or a grapefruit? Well, I like both lemons and grapefruits. I'm trying to think which is the state of being that I would rather be. I think I would probably rather be a grapefruit. I think that's the clear answer to that very important question. I would certainly rather be a grapefruit. I don't put it when I eat a grapefruit. I don't put anything on a grapefruit. I don't know. Some people put stuff on grapefruits, and I think it's weird. I just eat the grapefruit. I don't know. Is that weird? Is that normal? I feel like most people like put stuff on it. But I kind of just like the plain grapefruit. So, question from Gunpoint about how goes the interviewing process. Yeah, that's a big piece of news since we last spoke. Is I'm actually hiring. I didn't make a big fuss about it because the process has gone well. I have had a lot of candidates, more than I can really possibly manage. The interview process is going really well. I've spoken with some amazing people, but it goes a little bit slowly. I've been interviewing between 3 and 4 people a week, which is actually a lot. I mean, it's been hard to manage that in addition to doing all of this work for 081. So I've been working some really long days to do that. But yeah, there's it's been a couple of weeks of talking with people, but even with 3 or 4 people a week, there's way more great candidates than I've possibly had time to talk to. So it's been tough to try and figure out the order to do that in. I don't have news to announce on that front today, but I will have some news on the hiring front pretty soon. Let's see. How does ambient sound work if there's a token for a player and all other users have observer permission? So, like with lighting, you will see, if you don't have a specific token controlled, you will see and hear from the perspective of the actors that you have observer permission to. So for an observer user, like maybe for a stream or something where that user has observer permissions to all of the player characters, if they don't have a particular player character selected, they will see the vision of and hear the audio for the union of all of those tokens put together. Umbral Alderman asks, does the new Dice API have a built-in extension point for modules? So Dice So Nice could annotate the dice to be in a specific style. Yeah, absolutely. So when we create a dice term, like this one, this die term has its own internal options object that could be annotated. So for example, that term could, in its options object, have something like DSN style equals fire. And then that die term would have that additional extended data present. And when the roll is, serialized, that internal data would be still present on the term. So modules like Dice So Nice or something else that handles like term-specific dice rolling behaviors, you can add data into the dice roll, into the options object, and that data will flow through the system so that modules can follow that and use it. Asso Agres asks, can you reroll ones instead of setting them to a fixed value? Yeah, absolutely. You can reroll ones. So that would just be like you ask 3d6, reroll it. That would be a 3d6 less than 2. So like, for example, if you roll less than a 2, reroll. That's definitely supported. All right, I'm scrolling back to current. There's sorry, so much chat. I can't keep up with it all. But let's see. I see lots of comments about my grapefruit choice. I think I've generally chosen well, it sounds like. Question from Button Pusher TV. Can the max roll qualifier be disabled or flagged when used so it doesn't get abused? I'm wondering what you mean by abused. I think, so I should mention, like, if a modifier is applied to the dice roll, it's going to show up, say, like in the chat log. Like, it's going to be logged that modifier was used. So for example, like, suppose you're worried like your player's trying to cheat and they're going to roll like, oh, I'm going to roll my 1d20, but minimum 19. I can't get worse than a 19. If they were to do that and they roll a 6, but then it shows up as 19, like, it's in the chat log that they used that minimum. So like, yeah, they got a 19, but they got a 19 because they asked for a 19, So I'm maybe you have a different idea in mind about what abuse would look like, but it is transparent that minimum was applied. So like, you would see in the formula and you would see in the log that it wasn't a straight roll. Can you say if you roll a 1, count as a 6? Good question, Eternal Mana. So the answer is yes and no. No, there is not a built-in dice roll modifier that would do that. However, the dice rolling system is very powerful and very flexible, and so you can define custom modifiers that you could define a custom modifier that would say treat a 1 as the highest result. And I don't know what you'd call that modifier, but you could easily make a modifier, just be a couple lines of code, that would, if you applied that modifier to, like, you know, let's call the modifier TLAH, treat lowest as highest. Suppose you were to roll, 46 TLAH, then by defining that custom TLAH modifier, anytime you roll a 1, it would count it as a 6. And so that's the kind of thing that in the module system you can define those custom modifiers that would define, bespoke behaviors that are relevant to your game system. Gracian asks, do inline rolls also include these denotations within their tooltip when they are rolled? Yeah, so an inline roll, that if it's deferred like this, when, say I were to roll like a 1d4, reroll less than 3. So if I were to roll this bless, but reroll if it's less than 3, that is reflected in the posted. So I rolled like 2 1s in a row, but what exactly you rolled and the modifiers that were applied, it's shown in the log. So there is like a clear record of what happened and why. All right. Yeah, so France 5K0, yeah, you can definitely roll privately. So as the GM, for example, you can privately roll some dice. So like, 46, this roll as a private GM roll, only myself and maybe the assistant game master, who's also a game master, would be able to see this dice roll in the log. There's lots of ways to control the visibility of that. John07 asks, can we get walls that stop lighting effects but not vision? No. Sorry, John. Vision, like the passage of light and the passage of sight, I think in my mind those are non-differentiable. If light passes through the object, then sight can pass through the object as well. Obviously, like, there are some kind of exceptions. Like, you could have a very like blurry or partially opaque screen that can allow some light to come through, but you can't see through it. But I think keeping lighting and vision on the same thing, I think that makes sense. And so my initial thought there is no. I think what you're trying to get at, though, is not. I think what you're trying to get at is not that you want that feature. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're trying to get at is I want to make lights that are not round. That's kind of how I read your question. And the desire to make lights that are not round and the desire to customize the way that walls interact with lighting or vision, I think you're viewing that wall change as a way to achieve what you really want, which is I want lights that are not round. Now, I might be putting words in your mouth or I might be wrong, but I think if that's what you're after, I think the desire to make lights that are not round, that are polygons, I think is a totally valid use case that I envision the software supporting in the future, where you would have a sort of polygon draw tool that would allow you to define a light region with its own tint, its own animation, its own stuff. I envision that being a future feature of Foundry. I don't have a timeline for you on that. It's not part of this major version. But I do think that supporting polygon light sources is something that is a desired feature that I have. Um, Are there plans for entity links to include playlist sounds? Yeah, good question, Mooman. I might need to look into that. I think it's currently possible to link to them, but I think what it does when you do it is not super useful. Oh, no, it's not possible. Okay, yeah, so extending the playlist type as something that you can link to, like with a dynamic link like this is definitely something that I should do. Maybe if any of my moderators are around and still listening, maybe someone can take a note of that for me. Definitely this would be a good, fairly low-hanging fruit enhancement that you should be able to create this kind of link to a playlist. Now, the behavior with other links is that they open the sheet, and the sheet for the playlist is just this one, which is not super useful. So I mean, definitely what would be desired is maybe a button that plays the playlist or plays the sound rather than just opening its configuration. That requires a little bit more thought because it would be an exception to the normal workflow. Okay, I'm going to take maybe 2 or 3 more questions, and then I will wrap it up for today. Ishmael asks, is it possible to play a sound when you click an action? The concept of clicking an action is sort of a game system specific concept at the moment, because different game systems have different internal definitions of what an action is. And so, certainly the API makes it possible that when you click an action, you can make a sound. There isn't a core software framework that does that out of the box, because what an action is and the circumstances in which an action is performed is a little bit, it's system agnostic. So the framework is there for game systems to play sounds when actions occur, or modules to play sounds when actions occur, but the base Foundry software makes no assumptions about what those actions are or what sounds would happen. Let's see here. Could you implement a mass preload sounds? Good question, Green Threat. I think that's a good idea. Now, it's maybe a little bit unfriendly in that, you could very easily with that feature be asking your players to download, 100, 200, 300 megabytes worth of audio, depending on what you have in your playlist. So providing a playlist level, preload all option, it's kind of like, it's a double-edged sword. It could be useful, but it could also really crush your players' bandwidth if you used it incorrectly. So I think I'm on the fence with that a little bit. Like I have trouble imagining a world in which you need to preload more than just a couple of sounds. So I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I understand why you'd ask, but I'm worried for your players if you maybe use that on a playlist that's quite large. I'd be worried for you as well, of course, if you're hosting those audio files yourself, because that becomes upload bandwidth that you need to provide for every one of your players. So like if you've got 100 megabytes worth of audio on your computer that you're using in Foundry, and then you click preload all, and you've got 5 players, you've got to upload 500 megabytes worth of data. It would create a bad experience if you did it unintentionally or something. Let's see. Torpedo Bench asks about caching. So caching is, for static files, caching headers are applied by the Foundry server itself, although you can be a little bit smarter with it by setting, setting different caching preferences that you prefer in your reverse proxy layer if you have one. But yeah, the browser will cache audio files as well as image files, other stuff like that. Now, since I'm creating audio buffers, like some things are cached, some things are not cached, but it's not something I have a lot of customizability for. It's sort of just the behavior that occurs by default. Bonarvici asks about preloading. Can you preload with macros? Yeah, you can preload programmatically. So you can get a sound and you can trigger it to preload. There's a function that you can call that would trigger that sound to preload. So you could build a macro that would preload your sounds. As far as a visual indicator that preloading is done for everyone, I don't have that at the moment. That is a nice idea. It's a nice conceptual feature to keep track of what everyone is preloading and then report back in to understand like when everyone has finished preloading. I don't have that feature available, but it is a nice idea. Frenick asks about preloading for people who aren't in the game. Preload only works for people who are connected. So if it doesn't remember that setting, so that when it only affects people who are currently connected. Flamewave asks, any plans to test lighting with your mouse pointer? It could be done. I hadn't thought of that as being as much a need as with sound, because with sound, I think sound testing is a little bit more cumbersome, but certainly like with a token, you can test token vision pretty easily. But you might not always want to have a token placed. So having some kind of toggle mode to preview vision from your mouse cursor location, I mean, I could see that being useful now that similar technology exists for sound. It's something worth considering and exploring, perhaps. All right, I think last question for me, and then I've got to wrap it down because I'm getting tired. It's been a long week, but let me try and choose one great final question. So many questions about preloading. I think it's an interesting and important feature. I hadn't expected it to be such a crowd pleaser topic. Origin, I don't want to duck your question about TypeScript. It's a good question, but I don't have the emotional energy to get into a TypeScript versus non-TypeScript conversation at the 3 hour and 5 minute mark of my stream. So that's a question that I'll have to save for next time. But if you're in the dev Discord, I'm happy to chat with you a little bit about it. All right, the final question from Terry the Tryhard. Zoned weather was discussed on the Discord at some points. Is it still planned for eventual development? Planned is a tricky word. there's multiple stages that an idea goes through in the backlog. There's like, has it been written down? Yes or no. Is it something that we want to do? Yes or no. If it's something that we want to do we have a timeline in mind for when we're going to do it? Yes or no. If we've planned the timeline, is it done yet? Yes or no. Limited fields of effect for weather effects is definitely in the category of we want to do it, but there is not yet a timeline. So I think improved weather effects and more tools related to weather effects is something that definitely is an ambition of mine. It's definitely something I want to see added to the software. But I don't have a timeline for you on that yet. It's something I'd love to do, but there's lots of things I'd love to do, and I can only do some of them. But yeah, I think limiting the field of effect of a weather effect is absolutely something that I want to see happen. All right, I think that is it. I will take one last question from Revelo Waldo about the source of an asynchronous role. I think this is something that presumably it would be a module implementing that asynchronous rolling flow. So the module could annotate the role object to say, it's this type of role, and that annotation would stay on the role object so that once it's been finally created, you would know like what it was created by or how. So you can put that extra sort of metadata on the role object. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have, folks. It has been a pleasure chatting with you all. I hope you've enjoyed the stream. There was a lot that I covered. I hope it was really useful and entertaining and informative. It was great hanging out with you all. Thank you all so very much for the support. Please bear in mind that Foundry is part of what has allowed this software to be successful and this community to be successful is the willingness of folks like yourself to share this project with your friends, with your groups. Thank you so much for that word of mouth. It's super important, and it's so appreciative, so much appreciated by me. So thank you all for showing up, for supporting this, for talking about it, for sharing what Foundry can do, and I look forward to chatting with you all next time. And stay tuned, hopefully tomorrow, for this alpha release. But bear in mind what I discussed at the beginning. This is definitely for testing. It is not stable. It is not for your live games. Please be aware of that. Don't rush headfirst into this alpha build. All of these features will make it to release, and before too long, but it needs some testing first. So please be thoughtful about that. But if you can help test, that would be great. All right, thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend with games and friends and everything else you all have going on. So until next time, cheers, happy gaming, and I will see you soon.